Historically, as a business, we did around 25 searches a year. We've actually gone through quite a large transformation, and our exec population has changed in size and scale, and we've taken it down a level. So whereas I looked after the top 100 people in the business, I now look after the top 700. Hence why the growth in team, and we continue to grow. But with that size of scale and change as well, you'll understand why we've moved away from just servicing direct sourcing for our exec population. There's actually other value that we can add to the business through helping them strategize what they should be approaching, technology being part of that, but certainly workforce planning in a large organization is, well, certainly the three that I've worked in is always a bit of a challenge. As well as if you've worked in a highly matrixed organisation, actually finding who makes the decisions and getting them to do things for you is always a bit of a challenge as well. So when I joined the exec search team, I say joined, I was the only person in it. So that was 3 years ago, and although they had a couple of people 5 years ago, for example, those people were gatekeepers to the big search firms. They were not necessarily business partnering. So what we've managed to do is bring in a number of people with a similar remit around really partnering with the business and helping us get a much more robust governance around how we assess talent, how we identify that talent, how we engage with it, how we keep it engaged. So it's much more relationship-led than sometimes it can feel a little transactional. It can feel like you go from search to search without really engaging. Supply management, I imagine we all have very similar issues and challenges here around some of the big search providers and their relationships with our key stakeholders and how we actually manage to get ourselves into that relationship somehow. But I've left innovation at the bottom because it segues quite nicely into what we're here to talk about. When I came into BT, we didn't really have the function. They didn't really understand exec search and how it's evolved over the past 10 years, let alone the past few years where technology has really changed the way we can identify talent. Attraction and engagement, given the various technologies we can use now. Assessment, again, it can depend on function, it can depend on size of business here. Sometimes you'll have that corridor conversation and you'll find that people are getting jobs off of the back of that. Other people are more robust and will have 15 interviews and still not make a decision. So there are lots of things around now that can actually help us improve that engagement, and actually from a business case point of view, when you're actually going to present to the leadership and getting them to buy your point of view and your philosophy, I found it quite useful just to break them down into each of those categories. Because we use search firms as our main source, people sometimes forget that actually in the exec space, a lot of people know each other, especially when we get to the exco level, that board level. So where it can be quite awkward and difficult, and what we want to get away from are things like hiring friends and family and that sort of thing. We want to get into professional referrals. Who do we think is good? And how do we get out into that network? LinkedIn, which I have on here as well, I mean, geez, LinkedIn, what I find funny about LinkedIn is it actually started in something like 2004. So a lot of people don't really realise that. And so when I speak to some of my hiring managers and my HR community, I actually had one, if it's a couple of weeks ago now, but actually said to me, oh, I put some words into LinkedIn and these people came up. That's what you do, isn't it? Maybe. But at the same point, that's what some people have almost looked at LinkedIn now. Yes, it's been brilliant. It's actually, I think it's changed the way we do recruitment, but it's almost old hat now, and a lot of people I find are actually disengaging from it, especially in the exec community. So something like a Sixley where actually there might not be a referral fee. Some of these guys actually find that almost a little bit dirty. They don't want to be associated with that. Are you just recommending me because you're going to get a fee for it? Actually, they just like to be part of being able to connect you to really exciting roles. We're quite fortunate in that BT, as a British iconic brand, from an external perspective, a lot of people actually look at it and go, wow, it looks like it's changing, it looks like it's quite exciting. EE acquisition, BT Sports. So actually when we look at referrals, we've managed to do quite a lot raising the profile where people will listen to us. So things like referrals and alumni. I've put McKinsey alumni up there. It's probably not the best example of what I'm trying to actually talk about here, because that's actually a job board for anyone that uses it. But the essence of what they're trying to do, and Alexa and I were talking about this earlier, Retention of good execs we are finding particularly challenging because those really good people will have options out in the market, especially if they are technology related themselves. And we have been guilty in the past of when they've left the business, we lose all contact with them. We lose contact to their networks. We lose contact to all their expertise. We lose them as brand ambassadors in that space, which is criminal, really, especially when we have this type of technology available to us. So McKinsey built that themselves. We're actually looking at doing something very similar with, you'll be familiar with things like Yammer. You might be less familiar with similar type brands called Hivebright. Hivebright offers the same functionality as a LinkedIn. So it's a networking tool, it's a contact tool, you have a news feed in there, you can upload a load of content, but what it is it's bespoke to your business, so you can brand it. If your technology guys are particularly risk adverse and security conscious, then you can feed that into your own technology business as well. It's quite useful. Other things, HireVue, that's new, so we've only actually just started the implementation of HireVue. We used Sonru before that. Now, video interviewing is a contentious subject for exec, because everyone goes, we shouldn't be using it at exec. Well, it comes in different guises, and I have a view on it simply that actually, for those of you that might use business Skype and how terrible that is to connect people internationally, HireVue is a much better tool actually just to video conference as much as anything else. Something more like Powwow, which I don't know if anybody uses Powwow, which is very good as well. HireVue also has a lot of AI integrated into it now, which again, if you're looking at assessment for technology now, I still think it's very early necessarily to be adopting it, but actually if you're a part of that beta stage testing with these technologies, you're going to be ahead of the curve because it takes time for this AI to embed and learn what it is that's important about your business. So you notice I've got Hogan on there as well. Interview scheduling software. We don't have this, by the way. I just know somebody at Facebook that was showing me what they have here, and it's not always right for the exec space because it might not be that high touch, but again, Alex and I were talking about, even if it's just about booking rooms and that admin type activity, we should be able to automate a load of that now. And almost if you are, depending on what industry sector you are in, if you're in a technology sector or a technology related sector, I think people almost expect to engage with this type of thing, and if you don't have it, I think we're going to get to a point where they might even question why. Why is all this stuff still manual? Are you really a tech firm? So interestingly enough, what else have we got on there? Pymetrics. Gamification became a bit of a dirty word. They don't like gamification. I loved it because I like playing games. But equally, again, from an AI and people not really understanding or knowing what you're testing them on is a really good indication of actually what they're good at and a true indication of them. So a real plethora of things there. And I left onboarding till last because I don't know about your businesses, but onboarding for us from an exec point of view is an absolute horror show. Up until about 18 months ago, we sent out what looked like a mortgage application pack. It was genuinely, you kind of look at it and go, really, guys? And these are our most, we probably just paid a 200K fee for the person, and we're going to send them now. One of the sheets of paper actually had dotted lines that you would cut around. And they're like, bring this on day one. No. Really? I'm probably painting a really good picture of BT right now. We don't do that anymore, I'd like to add. Exactly. I wish it was perforated, yeah. No. So lots of different things there, and I guess what was interesting from Natasha's point around what's everybody really interested in, identify. I think it really depends on where your business is at, but also what your philosophy comes down to. So everyone seems to be really on the attraction and engagement bus, but for me, from a search background, the identification is the crux of what we do. And recruiting off the CV, for anyone that knows me, is my absolute pet hate. I much prefer the networking, almost back to the origins of exec search, where that management consulting approach really comes down to it's who you know. It's about de-risking that hire as much as anything. Can you do soft referencing on that person and find out what did they actually deliver? What were they actually like in those senior level discussions? What did the team think of them? That's the stuff that I think where certainly I like to think that my team can add some value. I mentioned that I'd talk through some of the stuff that we've done. We are not technology heavy right now. We're quite early on that journey. So from a CRM point of view, I mentioned that I'm a bit jealous of some of you. That's because we have to use one of our suppliers. So over the last couple of years, we've used a market mapping and insight business, and they actually have their own bespoke candidate tracking CRM type tool where you can put everything in. So with a mixture of that and our OD, our org design software, we kind of have to mix and match to actually track our people. So, and the reason I mentioned the org design software is because if you're involved in succession planning within your businesses, depending on how evolved you are in your thinking on succession planning, you might find that you have nothing of the sort. You might have that's my number 2 if I get hit by a bus. Or you might have something moving towards where we're getting to now, which is you've got some options for internal. We have a team of exec assessment people in BT now. That's an internal team that have actually put the entire exec population through a form of testing. Now, I'm not saying that that is proving who's great and who's not, but what it does is it gives us a base level to go off of in actually looking at what we think leaders need to look like moving forward. And it allows us to use that org design software to track and put people's names down against potential roles. And they could be against several roles in different parts of the business. But it also allows us, for those external names that we've met, to track and put them against them. So it's not just internal succession, it's market succession. And we should always look to engage with that population once we've identified they're a good fit for our business. Plenty of challenges we looked at. Budget being the main constraint, integration being another one. So the CRM system, again, one of the big things that we came up against was integrating that into our current technology, whereas actually if it could be cloud-based would be amazing. And we shouldn't really have to integrate it. But alas, risk-adverse business suggests that we just need to get around it however we can. Working with the wider TA function, so we mentioned CRM system, we've jumped on the back of the SAP finance system, and actually that's going to grow into something huge. And the one thing I could not have done without just even getting any of this over the line is having your business sponsors, the ones that really understand what it is that you're trying to do. We've been on a journey of our leadership, actually. A lot of people have been at BT for a long time. They know the products inside out. Technically, they are very, very strong. But would all of them be recognised externally as people leaders, as talent leaders? Maybe. I think people that really understand talent will understand the technology and what you're trying to do from an engagement point of view. So to get those leaders in place is really, really important. And then I'm fortunate that I went to PwC and Accenture before I came to BT, so I learned how to do a lot of slides, which from a business case point of view is invaluable. So one of the points on Natasha's was getting data out of your business and understanding what it is. Well, it took me 6 months to get a ballpark figure on what our exec spend was across our business because we didn't even track it. So in-house exec search functions, some of them are really established, some of them less so. It seems to be a growing trend and a really useful, valuable trend, I would suggest, one that will keep going. Certainly I would guess that a lot of people are quite early in tracking that data, but for those of you that have been going a while, all of you will recognise the value of it.